August 4th every year, the secular, decentralized, open-source religion of Timefulism celebrates the period in our history from 12,800 BC to 11,900 BC, which is when humanity first learned to bake bread. Göbekli Tepe had not yet been built, war had not yet been invented, and agriculture was still millennia away. During that period, as the last ice age slowly drew to a close, our ancestors still shared the earth with woolly mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and giant ground sloths. Humanity obtained its food through hunting and foraging, but in some places, humans established settlements. One such settlement, which we now call Shubayqa I, was located in the Black Desert of what is now Jordan. The hunter-gatherer settlers of Shubayqa I were Natufians. They lived in semi-permanent structures made of stone and wood, organized in circular or oval shapes. Their technology included stone tools for grinding, cutting, and hunting, as well as bone implements. And they had a beautiful, well-preserved fire pit. Archaeologists estimate that only between 20 and 100 Natufians lived at Shubayqa I at any given time. They had language but no system of writing, so tribe members could only gain knowledge by experience and word of mouth. And they had to keep all that knowledge in their heads. These people therefore had a far richer and more active mental life, and better memories than many of us do today. Gazelles, rabbits, and birds were plentiful, and the Natufians knew how to bring them down. They balanced their diet with nuts, berries, vegetables, and fruits. One day, a Natufian must have picked a stalk of wild einkorn wheat and recognized that it could be a food source. Initially, they probably pounded the wheat and mixed it with tubers and water to form a sort of gruel. But over time, the preparation process became more meticulous, involving repeated milling and sieving to achieve a fine flour-like consistency. It then occurred to them to mix the flour with water and bake it in their stone fire pit over an open fire. The result was a flatbread that was probably the world's first processed food, which the Natufians could take along with them on hunts and gathering expeditions for quick energy.
In addition to baking bread, the Natufians also knew how to roast meat, and it's possible that they even knew how to cure meat to preserve it. Which brings us to the first big takeaway from this video. You've probably heard of the Earl of Sandwich, who is widely credited with having invented the sandwich in the 18th century, after what we must assume was years of painstaking experimentation with bread, cold cuts, and cheese. But this is almost certainly just one more example of Europeans taking credit for the discoveries of other civilizations. Think about it. The Natufians lived at Shubayqa I for nearly 3,000 years after inventing bread. They had condiments, and they had meat, and you just heard that they were smarter than us. Of course, they came up with the idea of a sandwich. So let's give credit where credit is due and celebrate August 4th for the Natufians' invention of the sandwich. And inhabiting the same settlement for 3,000 years must be some kind of a record for humankind. Perhaps we should give the sandwich some credit for that extraordinary record of stability and human harmony. What else do we know about these Natufians? They had no temples and no monuments and no other evidence of formal government, so we can infer that their society was relatively egalitarian. Leadership was probably based on age, experience, and skill. Community members were expected to pull their own weight while contributing to the common good. And there's no reason to think that women would not have been leaders, because hunting and gathering only takes about an average of 4 hours a day. They had more leisure time than any civilization since then. So they had it pretty good, sandwiches and all, for nearly 3,000 years. How many other civilizations can say that? Why is it that with all of our technological advances, our quality of life does not seem to match that of these Natufians?
Perhaps the beginning of the end was the development of agriculture itself, and the gradual rise of agricultural societies. As David Graeber and David Wengrow point out, the transition to agricultural society was so gradual that it makes little sense to call it a revolution. But by a certain point in each civilization, the transition was nearly complete, and people suddenly looked around and realized that huge changes had occurred. There was a priesthood and the beginnings of religion. Some individuals prospered more than others, and the result was class division with an aristocracy and the priesthood at the top, and a king on top of it all. The king, the aristocracy, and the priesthood formed the government, which then created a police force to protect citizens from each other and an army to protect everyone from outsiders. That all might sound okay, but each development carried with it a dark side. Religions could make unreasonable demands on the citizens, including even human sacrifice. Class divisions and aristocracy led to slavery or serfdom. Kingship became hereditary and therefore guaranteed that the best person for the job would rarely be king. And bad kings used police to suppress dissent and armies to wage wars of conquest in pursuit of empire, which led to human suffering on an unprecedented scale. The weather and other environmental factors became matters of life or death, whereas hunter-gatherers could always pack up and leave for better hunting grounds. Agricultural societies were fixed. If the crops failed, famine and mass starvation followed. No wonder agricultural civilizations don't typically last 3,000 years. There was some good, of course. Agriculture freed people up to study the world, make life-enhancing inventions, write poetry, make videos, and all that. And eventually, at least in some places, people were guaranteed certain freedoms and rights on a par with those of the Natufians at Shubayqa I. But humanity had those rights before agriculture, and humanity also already had sandwiches. So how exactly did Timefulism pick August 4th as the day to celebrate bread and sandwiches? Easy. It uses a simple time compression algorithm to map every day of the year to a period in the history of the universe, where the lengths of the periods get smaller as the year goes by. The best estimate for baked bread is about 12,400 BC, which falls in the period corresponding to August 4th. So please be sure to celebrate August 4th with us, and to spread the word about the true inventors of the sandwich. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for information about upcoming Timefulism days of contemplation.